few months ago, we went over Richard Petty's 1987 season, which turned out to be the final competitive season of his career. We know Richard Petty retired from driving in 1992, and that 1987 was his final competitive season. But how did the next 5 seasons work out for the King? In this 5-part series, we'll take a look at each of those seasons, leading up to the retirement of Richard Petty. So let's get started. Here is part 1 of the final years of Richard Petty's career, 1988. Prior to the 1988 season, Pontiac revealed a brand new body design for the Grand Prix. The 1988 Pontiac Grand Prix was a much smaller body than the 1987 model, and was also meant to be more aerodynamic. Richard Petty had been driving Pontiac since 1982, and was hoping to have a wonderful season driving the new Grand Prix, but that wasn't the case. Also for 1988, a new tire manufacturer entered NASCAR to challenge Goodyear. This new tire manufacturer was Hoosier Racing Tires. Hoosier could not convince Petty to join them, and Petty elected to stay with Goodyear. The 1988 season did not start off well for Petty. In the first practice for the Daytona 500, NASCAR checked over every Pontiac in the field that was entered in the 500, and had every Pontiac's deck lid chopped that measured an inch too long, and one of those Pontiacs was the 43 of Richard Petty. Then on February 9th, Richard got caught up in a bizarre accident. In practice, Charlie Rudolph was racing Ernie Irvan. When coming into the tri-oval, Rudolph's engine blew, and he spun in front of Irvan, causing his car to get airborne and flip multiple times down the front stretch. Richard was approaching the scene and was trying to slow down, but was hit by Bobby Hillin Jr. and suffered damage to his Pontiac. The Petty Enterprises team managed to get the car repaired, but entering the Twin 125 qualifiers, the bad luck continued for Richard Petty. Petty started 12th in the first Twin 125, and the SDP Pontiac wasn't strong enough to compete with the leaders. By lap 37, the King was involved in his second accident in 3 days. Going into turn 2, Petty was running side by side with the number 2 Kroger Chevrolet of Ernie Irvan. When the air got the back of his car loose, Richard tried to correct it, but hit the apron in the process and spun the car around. The 80 of Jimmy Horton and the 74 of John Linville were also collected. Petty would DNF in 30th. Petty would start 34th in the Daytona 500 and was looking to have a good finish, like his third place finish the year before. But for the 4th time in 1 week, the bad luck once again continued for Richard Petty. On the 106th lap, Richard was running in a group of 4 cars. When coming out of the turn 4, Petty was tagged by the 73 of Phil Barkdahl. Petty spun, and Barkdahl hit the wall hard. As Petty spun, the 14 of AJ Foyt couldn't avoid the spinning 43, and struck the 43's front bumper. The impact of Foyt and the force of Barkdahl spinning Richard caused the 43 to become airborne. Petty's car then flipped onto its roof and began to barrel roll. The speed the car was going as it rolled caused it to get up into the catch fence. Petty's car rolled along the catch fence 4 times before rolling back onto its wheels. As Petty's car was coming to a rest, the 15 of Brett Bodine could not avoid Richard and would end up T-boning Richard in the driver's door. Petty was helped from the car and was taken to the infield care center. Many fans who were fearing the worst rushed to the care center as well to await Petty's condition. Under the red flag, CBS commentator Chris Economaki had this to say.
This crash will undoubtedly end the career of Richard Petty.
After hearing Economaki say that, many started to question, would Richard Petty retire? A few moments later, Richard's crew chief and cousin, Dale Inman, came out and gave a report on Richard's condition. Richard was okay, only suffering an injured ankle. The next week at Richmond, Richard wouldn't let that injured ankle stop him. He was looking to rebound from his wreck at Daytona. Petty qualified 9th for the Pontiac Excitement 400 and immediately went to work. Petty had a very strong Pontiac and would finish 3rd. Neil Bonnet would win, giving Hoosier their first win in NASCAR. Richmond was scheduled to be reconfigured from its original half-mile oval configuration to its brand new 3/4-mile configuration, and prior to the start of the race, construction equipment was lined alongside the outside of the track, ready to get to work. Immediately after the checkered flag had dropped, Richard Petty hopped on a bulldozer with an STP logo on the grill and helped tear up part of the track. Another thing to add is that 3 generations of Petties, Lee, Richard, and Kyle, had all won races on the original half-mile configuration. Richard did not compete in the next race on the schedule. The next race was not a points event, but an exhibition race, the Goodyear NASCAR 500K, held at the newly built Calder Park Thunderdome in Melbourne, Australia. This was NASCAR's first trip outside of the US. Many Winston Cup regulars competed in the event, alongside some of the Winston West Series drivers and some of Australia's bests. Richard did not compete, but prior to the event set an unofficial track record for the Thunderdome, with a speed of 142.85 miles per hour and a time of 28.2 seconds. Dave Marcus would break Petty's record when he won the pole with a speed of 139.734 miles per hour. Even though Richard did not compete, his son Kyle did, driving the number 21 Kroger Chevrolet for DK Ulrich. Kyle would finish 10th, 11 laps down. NASCAR made its return to the U.S. the next week for the third points-paying race of the season, the Good Wrench 500 at Rockingham. Richard started 20th, but by lap 19, it all came crashing down. Going into turn 1, Rick Wilson came up and made contact with Richard's left rear. Richard's car then went up the banking and hit the outside wall very hard. Richard climbed out under his own power, but would DNF and finish in 41st, last place. This would drop Richard from 16th to 23rd in the standings. Richard started 24th at Atlanta, and it looked like he had a strong car. He charged through the field and got as high as 6th before pulling into the pits with engine issues. Petty went back out on the track before the engine completely expired on lap 301, bringing out a caution. Richard would DNF and finish in 23rd, and would drop 1 spot to 24th in the standings. Darlington was the next race, and in 1987, Richard finished 3rd and led 1 lap. Could he repeat the same performance he had then? Unfortunately, he could not. Richard started 30th and was out of the race very early. On lap 5, Kyle Petty blew his engine and made the track very hard to see for many drivers. Going into turn 1, Ernie Irvan, Bobby Hillin Jr., Benny Parsons, Michael Waltrip, and Neil Bonnet all got together and set off a big pileup. Richard could not avoid the wreck and was collected. His car suffered major damage, and Richard would DNF in 41st, last place, and once again would drop in the standings, this time to 29th. In the first 5 races that have been run so far, this was Richard's 4th DNF, his 3rd wreck, and his 2nd last place finish. Race number 6 was Bristol, the same race that Richard finished 2nd to Dale Earnhardt just 1 year ago. Richard was dealing with the flu this weekend, but still chose to race. Richard started 17th and managed to move up to finish 3 laps down in 6th, his 2nd top 10 of the season. At North Wilkesboro, Petty started 9th, and just like the year prior, would finish 6th, 2 laps down. This was Richard's 3rd top 10 of the season, and this would move him to 23rd in the standings. Petty started 27th at Martinsville, and was looking to keep his top 10 streak going, but unfortunately, the streak would come to an end. On lap 2, Dale Jarrett got loose coming off of turn 4, and as Jarrett corrected and came back onto the track, he made contact with the left front fender of Petty's STP Pontiac. Petty sustained minor damage to his left front fender, but had to pit due to tire rub. Petty came back out, but would fall 1 lap down, but a few laps later, the trouble continued for Petty. As Richard was fighting to get back on the lead lap, Richard would blow his engine, and Petty would take the car behind the wall and park it for the day. Petty DNF'd in 32nd, last place. This was Richard's 3rd last place finish of the season, as well as his 5th DNF. This finish would drop Richard to 25th in points. Talladega was the next race, and 1 year prior, Richard was involved in a terrifying accident that saw Bobby Allison go up into the catch fence, which led to the use of the restrictor plate. Richard would start 32nd, and wasn't much of a contender, finishing in 20th, 3 laps down. Richard was eligible to compete in the Winston, but due to Phil Parsons winning at Talladega the week before, Richard wasn't locked in. Richard had to compete in the Winston Open to race his way in. Richard started 12th in the Open, but would finish in 24th, 5 laps down to Sterling Marlin, meaning that Richard Petty would miss his first running of the Winston. The next race, however, would be a very difficult one for the Winston Cup Series. During practice, it was discovered that the Goodyear tire compound was too soft for the racing surface of Charlotte Motor Speedway, meaning the tires would blow very quickly and very easily. Goodyear scrambled to find a solution, but couldn't come up with one, and decided to pull out of the race. But eventually, Goodyear returned to the track. This time, Goodyear brought Daytona tires to the track, and Daytona tires were more durable, but were very slow. This didn't please the drivers, so every driver, except for Dave Marcus, decided to race on Hoosiers for the Coca-Cola 600. Richard started 30th, and for the first time all season, he would lead a lap. Richard led one lap on lap 116 due to pit cycles. In a race that saw many tire blowouts and huge accidents, Petty would finish in 15th, 8 laps down, moving him to 21st in points. At Dover, Richard would start 19th and finish 15th, 5 laps down, and this finish would move him up one more spot in the points to 20th. The Budweiser 400 at Riverside was the 12th race of the season. It was also the 48th and final Winston Cup Series race at Riverside. Richard had won 5 races at Riverside, as well as 4 poles. During qualifying, Richard wrecked his primary car in the S's. Richard had a backup car, but the backup car was a 1987 Pontiac Grand Prix. Richard managed to qualify in 29th. Richard was also very comfortable with the 1987 Pontiac. He had ran very well with it the year before, and it was also bad fast. As the race went green, Richard began to climb his way through the field, and by the time the race was coming to a close, he was locked in a battle for 5th place between himself and the Parsons brothers, Benny and Phil. Rusty Wallace took the checkered flag for the final win at Riverside, and Richard would cross the line 6th, his second lead lap finish of the season and 4th top 10 of the season. Richard would also move to 20th in the standings. Pocono was next on the schedule. This race is mostly remembered for the crash on the first lap that nearly claimed the life of Bobby Allison and would also end his career. Richard started 13th, and Richard, for the second week in a row, had a very fast car. Petty worked his way through the field, and by halfway, pit stops were underway, and after making his stop, Petty found himself in the top 5. Richard began charging his way to the lead. He passed Buddy Baker for 3rd, and eventually found himself in 2nd. And then by lap 138, Richard took the lead from Mark Martin. Richard would go on to lead the next 9 laps, the most laps he would lead in a race all season. On lap 146, while battling Ken Schrader and Jeffrey Bodine for the lead in the tunnel turn, a nudge from Bodine would cause Petty to lose control, get loose, and as Petty tried to correct it, the car snapped to the right and hit the wall with the right rear quarter panel, causing severe damage to the back end of his Pontiac. Richard would DNF in 26th, his 6th DNF of the season, and would fall back to 21st in points. Petty qualified 24th for the Miller High Life 400 at Michigan. The Petty Enterprises team had a strong car again, and Petty drove his way through the field and got as high as 5th, and stayed in the top 10 the majority of the race before dropping a cylinder. Petty would finish 24th, 4 laps down. NASCAR returned to Daytona for the Pepsi Firecracker 400 on July 2nd, which just so happened to be on Richard's 51st birthday. Petty qualified in 27th and was able to avoid a 6-car pileup on lap 2, but wasn't a contender all race long and would finish in 20th, 1 lap down. At Pocono, Petty, as well as the rest of the field, would run the race on Hoosier tires. Goodyear was told by NASCAR to pack up and leave the track after it was found that the tires had too wide of a tread. This was the first NASCAR race to not be run on Goodyear since 1956. Petty qualified 15th. Just like Pocono in June, Petty was able to drive up to the front thanks to pit cycles. Petty would lead 1 lap on lap 17. This was the 11th lap, and last lap, Petty would lead all season. He once again had a very strong Pontiac and was able to battle for the lead with Bill Elliott before falling back. On lap 161, Petty would blow his engine and bring his car behind the wall. Petty would DNF in 28th, the 7th DNF of the season for him. Richard qualified 34th for Talladega and ran as high as 19th. At one point during the race, CBS aired an interview they did with Richard, asking him how he felt about the poor season he was having.
I don't think we've really had a whole lot worse season. You know, we've tore up 5 race cars and totaled out 3 of them, just completely totaled them out. The other 2 was able to fix back, and it's just been really a bad deal. We got started off bad at Daytona, and you know, run pretty good the next race, and then we crashed again. It's just been up and down all deal, and the last 4 or 5 races we've run real good, and then something happens to the car. So at least we're not hitting anything right now.
Richard would finish in 21st, 1 lap down, and would move to 19th in the points. At Watkins Glen, NASCAR disqualified Hoosier from the event for the same reason as Goodyear 2 weeks ago at Pocono. The treads in their tires were way too wide. Every team switched to Goodyear for the race. Petty qualified for the Budweiser at the Glen, and just like Riverside, he was driving the 1987 Pontiac Grand Prix. Petty would finish in 17th. This was Petty's 3rd and final lead lap finish of the season. Race 19 of the 1988 season was the Champion Sparkplug 400 at Michigan. This was Richard's 500th consecutive start. Richard qualified 24th and would race his way up to 12th before pulling into the pits a few laps later. The Petty Enterprises team raised the hood on the STP Pontiac and looked over the engine before sending Petty back out. Later on, Petty would bring his car behind the wall after experiencing distributor problems. Petty would DNF in 39th, his 8th DNF of the season. Richard started 20th at Bristol, and yet again had a very fast Pontiac. Richard climbed as high as 2nd, but would wound up finishing in 8th, 3 laps down. This was Richard's 5th and final top 10 of the season, and by finishing 8th, Petty would move up to 18th in the standings. The next 3 races would be disastrous for Richard Petty. A blown engine at Darlington would leave him 33rd. A crash on the newly reconfigured Richmond International Raceway would leave him 34th, and another blown engine at Dover would leave him 38th. 3 DNFs in 3 races. Richard now had 11 DNFs on the season. Richard would qualify 27th at Martinsville, and almost immediately began having mechanical problems with the car. Richard would bring his car behind the wall, and pit reporter Larry Newber reported that Richard was having a host of problems in the rear of the car. Richard would come back out on the track, but would finish in 27th, 187 laps down, dropping him to 23rd in points. Petty qualified 33rd at Charlotte, but going into turn 2 early in the race, trouble struck. Going into turn 2, his car broke loose and spun around. Petty hit the wall with the driver's side, causing significant damage to his Pontiac. Petty would bring the car behind the wall and would DNF in 38th, his 12th DNF of the season. Richard qualified 16th for the Holly Farms 400 at North Wilkesboro, which was originally supposed to be ran on October 2nd, but was rescheduled to October 16th due to rain. Richard was running inside the top 20 in the early stages of the race when on lap 179 he would go too high entering turn 4, got loose, and spun out. Richard would rebound and finish 18th, 3 laps down. We have now come to the final 3 races of the 1988 season. These final 3 races would also once again be disastrous for Richard Petty. A blown engine at Rockingham would leave him in 25th. An oil pan problem at the inaugural race at Phoenix would leave him in 35th. And a hard crash into the outside wall at Atlanta would leave him in 36th, bringing his DNF total on the season to 15. As Bill Elliott celebrates his first Winston Cup Series championship, Richard finishes 1988 22nd in points, his first time outside the top 20 in points since 1965. Richard's results for 1988 also had 1 top 5, 5 top 10s, 11 laps led, and 3 lead lap finishes. Looking back at his 1987 stats and comparing them to 1988, it's a huge difference. Many factors could have played a role in Richard Petty's decline in 1988. Could it have been the new Pontiac body? Or could it have been the new aero package? Maybe it could have been the tire war. Or has age finally caught up to him? Maybe yes, maybe no. In the final race of the season at Atlanta, 2 drivers retired, Cale Yarborough and Benny Parsons, and many fans were still questioning, would Richard Petty also retire? No, he did not. Petty returned for the 1989 Winston Cup season. But would 1989 be a better season for Richard Petty? I'll tell you right now, no, it was not. It was even worse. But that's for part 2. Join me next time as we look at part 2 of the final years of Richard Petty's career, 1989.